We're going to move quickly into the democracy panel so that we finish by 5. We can do it, trust me. I will, however, quickly tell, because, democracy panel, right? This is what we're here for, doubling down on democracy. I'll tell a quick story. So I was the president of New Jersey Policy Perspective. Many of you who know me know that I am a stickler about the budget, right? And the budget process in New Jersey is offensive to the public. The budget is about $60 billion every year. And when Trenton passes the budget, they introduce it into committee, and they vote on it 10 minutes later. Very few of the lawmakers have read the budget. It goes to the floor 3 days later, and then they pass it into law. And so I had the audacity to say that that's ridiculous. And I had even said at the point, because in the way that that process works, where the power really lies is the governor, the Senate president, and the Assembly speaker. And at that time, all 3 of those positions were white men. And so I said, just to point it out, that is the dictionary definition of systemic racism, right? When you have one group of folks deciding something for a state as diverse as New Jersey especially, but even if you're in Nebraska, who cares, right? To have such a small group of folks deciding so much for all of us in such a sort of quiet way was offensive. And I had a lawmaker come up to me and say, Brandon, I'm so confused as to why you're upset about the timetable. We've been talking about this for months. And I'm like, define we. Lawmakers, we meet, we talk about the budget all the time. They forget that they are responsible to you. And that transparency is determined by what you see, right? And that public participation is determined by public participation. And so when we talk about democracy in the state, I would argue we have the weakest democracy in this country, right? And so when we talk about harvesting and seeding, we need to seed a culture of democracy in a very intentional way. And there's a lot of things that work to prevent us from doing so and to discourage us from doing so. But we really have to take advantage of this moment and all the things that we built towards in this election and all those elections to come to see the democracy that we deserve. And so with that, let us start the democracy panel. Remember, again, 45 minutes, 15 minutes Q&A. You have note cards that you can write your questions on your table. But we're going to have the democracy panel. So our participants are Nuzhat Chowdhury, who is the director of the Democracy and Justice Program at the NJ Institute for Social Justice. Antoinette Miles, who's state director of New Jersey Working Families Alliance. Jesse Burns, who's the executive director of the League of Women Voters New Jersey. And our moderator for this conversation is Hanal Patel, who is the law and policy director at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. Please give them a round of applause.
Hey, everyone. So let me just start by saying thank you for staying with us today. We are the last conversation before a break, and then we hope all of you are staying with us tonight for the candidate forum. Stay, get a seat early. There's a lot of people coming tonight, so you want to make sure you see everyone. But we're going to keep this going. It's been an interesting day, I think. I want to start by saying that. I think I feel motivated, I feel excited, and I feel a little depressed. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. And I hope we can, sit with that for a little bit together. And I hope we offer you something to think about. I'm so excited about this conversation today. These 3 people, the earlier panel, some of my favorite people in the state to talk to. Here, these panels, a group of people, all the people who've been on this stage today have really been doing what Sherrilyn asked all of us to do this morning, that we need to both fight and build. And so I hope you keep that in mind. I hope you put those questions down, keeping that in mind, that every person here is doing exactly that every single day. And it's not easy. It's tough, both with all the challenges coming, but also recognizing that it can't always be defense. You have to have an affirmative vision. You have to be building. You have to be thinking about things going forward. So that is what we'll be talking about. So I will start by just asking a question. If you've been paying attention to the news, if you've been paying attention today, it's rough here in the land of democracy. It's a little tough. Everything's under attack. Voting rights, but our very institutions, our democratic organizations, institutions that we hold dear, are under attack, or are being just being suborned to do purposes that we never imagined they would do. So let me ask this fierce group of people: how are you feeling right now?
How long do we have again? Sorry. I, I guess I'll start since I picked up the microphone first. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate this question because honestly, my mood of it has even changed over the course of the dialogue that we've happened to have here today. And, I'm going to lean into me being elder, millennial, chronically online. And the thing that, a lot of folks have been saying is like, okay, I'm somewhere between like locking in and crashing out, which means like I'm focused or I'm like, it's sort of like fight or flight. And I think that really, as we started to look at this new administration and the attacks on our institutions, attacks on voting rights and our democracy, everything that is fundamental in terms of our rights and freedoms as individuals here in this nation, as all the people who exist here, and really just understanding that I was in a position of feeling that we are not powerless, right? And that they may control the levers of government. And, we see the wealthiest man on the planet, at the levers of our government, and our government being used to extract an agenda of really repression, suppression, and disinvestment. And I felt really unstable about that, right? Which was the intent, right? Is to make us feel unstable, to make us give up our power, and to say that nothing can be done. And it is a evolving feeling and an evolving conscience about how we combat that. And I think the thing that I have really tried to ground myself in and ground myself in the work that we're doing is that we still have to do the hard work of fighting every single day and not giving an inch. And I've really been buoyed by not just this room, but we saw, I think 2 weeks ago, there were these hands-off protests that took place. New Jersey had 25 of them across the state. And the hands-off protests really, in Ocean County, New Jersey Working Families Alliance, we helped co-anchor that action in deep red Ocean County and outside of the VA clinic, and we had over 1,000 people show up. Over 1,000 people show up and say, no, we're not going to allow them to attack Social Security and Medicare, these the most popular programs that we have as a federal government, really the bedrock of our institutions in terms of providing and making sure we have a social safety net and health care for individuals. And, really it is those moments that keep me grounded and keep me steadfast. And then the other thing that I'll just sort of say is that I've also been buoyed by just like the small victories. And I've been running around sort of crazy here today because New Jersey Working Families Alliance, we've been supporting a local case in court right now in the Camden City to help make sure that 13 women who are running for local office as district leaders in their community can get on the ballot. They were denied from getting on the ballot, and I think that we are like 5 minutes away from having a consent order that says that these women can get on the ballot in terms of being able to run for office and represent their community. And so I'm like savoring in these small, thank you, please clap for that. So I'm like savoring in these small moments and small victories because, really it is a pendulum swing. And I'm comfortable in that. And I'm comfortable in knowing that, we're going to have, this arc of justice, right? We're going to have those pendulum swing moments, but we as individuals, either collectively or individually, we're all coming together around and saying, no, we don't have to accept things as they are, and we're going to push back, whether it is at the local level or at the community level or even at the state level.
On? Oh, great. There's no light on there. Anyway, so I, like you, Antoinette, am an elder millennial who's chronically online. I spend most of my time doom scrolling, so just the worst news articles you can ever see, just one after the other. And the vibes are bad. Every day the vibes seem to grow worse. But I think one of the cool things about being in these online spaces is that you see how many people are actually angry about the things that are happening. I'm in a lot of online spaces where there are younger folks, millennials, Gen Z, whatever, and they know a lot more about what's happening politically in our democracy, injustices than I did when I was their age and younger, and they're angry about it in a way that I don't think we were when we were younger. And I think that is a net positive thing, because all of these things are happening that seem so out of our control. But young folks are there, they're listening, they're learning about the things that are happening, and they're the ones who will engage now and go forward and engage more in the future. So last week, the US House passed the SAVE Act, which I think even a couple of years ago, pre-Trump, no one would really know what that is or what it means for democracy, what sort of impact it has on us and our communities. But I saw a lot of anger among younger folks online about the SAVE Act, people who are looking into what that means, what it means for our rights, what it means for voter registration, what are the long-term implications, what are the short-term implications. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, so that's bad, but I think these things happening in an era where younger people have the resources out there to educate themselves and to find ways to express themselves and organize, I think that's really important. And I do think that it's nice that that is happening, even though the circumstances are pretty terrible. And I think the thing that gives me perspective is sort of what Sherrilyn Ifill was saying earlier, which is that when you take a step back, we're in an unprecedented moment, but we're kind of not. Things like this have happened through history all the time. My parents are from Bangladesh. Last year in Bangladesh, they had basically a student uprising that displaced a president who was essentially a dictator for years and years. Students are angry, and students have always been on the right side of history. And so I think seeing that happening, seeing that it has happened throughout history time and time again, that gives me hope that will also happen now.
So no small question. I wouldn't expect anything less from Hennel than to come right out the gate with the big question. So first of all, I think I'm feeling incredibly grateful for this space. I know a lot of the faces out here, and I can say that there are some of the best organizers out in this room, some of the leaders that are fighting, for reproductive justice, climate justice, are in this space, affordable housing. There are doctors that are serving patients no matter what. There are litigators out here who are, defending the Constitution and the rule of law. So I am incredibly grateful to be in this space, because if there's one thing I don't feel right now is lonely. And that is so important. Yeah, give that a minute. The community is important. That being said, I am frightened, and I'll be vulnerable as a leader right now. This is not easy. I'm frightened. I feel, unmoored, uncertain. I feel like a lot of folks are asking me for answers I don't have. It's hard to wake up and feel full of doubt, I think, and also unsafe. But at the same time, I know that reality, it has existed for so many in our country for so long, right? It might be heightened, but it's not new to wake up every day and feel unsafe. And this makes me think about the work that we all do up here. the work to build a multiracial democracy, the work to protect and defend our democracy. You know, what parts are we defending? What parts are we protecting? These questions, I think, are really important when we think about a democracy, as Sherrilyn Ifill said, that we're fighting and building, that is very much rooted in white supremacy, capitalism. An American dream that very much defines success as being able to hoard power and wealth and privilege. In some ways, democracy is working as designed. That is why we are here, right? That does not mean that I think our democracy is not worth defending. It means that I think that is our work together to really think about those pieces of democracy that we need to start to dismantle and what we're going to build together going forward. And I could not even contemplate thinking about those big questions alone, and that is why I'm grateful for the space that we're in today.
Thank you. I appreciate, Jesse, you ended with the problems that have always existed in our democracy. And the fact is that it is by design in many ways from the start of this country, the start of this state, that democracy has always been limited. It has been rooted in white supremacy. It's always been a matter of who has power and who doesn't. It's always been who are the outsiders. So the work is right now, the most crucial part about building is to actually try to build a real multicultural, multiracial democracy that allows everyone to have a voice. And to do that, you have to envision something different than what has ever existed. But what better place than New Jersey to envision that? Because as the earlier panel mentioned a couple of times, we are one of the most diverse states in the country. And it means that we're on the cusp, if not already, of being a majority people of color state. So a state that's existed since the beginning of this country can actually live into the promises that have never really existed, that never really came to be. But we have work to do that. It doesn't just happen. So all of this stuff, the diversity makes us unique and great, but we know that it's not reflected. It's simply not reflected in our electoral process, and in that communities of color are often not heard. We see that in who is regularly the leaders in this country, in this state. We see how often they are just always white. But it's not just the factor of these individual leaders, but who gets a seat at the table. As Brandon said, who gets to be in those rooms to discuss the budget process? Who gets to have a voice in in deciding who gets elected? And it's always more limited than we would like. So, to my question, what do we need to do? What do we need to do in this room of passionate people to address that? How do we change that to build something better?
I can take that first. So I'm wearing a shirt here that says "Your vote, your power." No, our vote, our power. I can read. And I think this is the core of building a democracy that is inclusive, that is accessible to all, and particularly for the diverse communities that across the country, but especially here in New Jersey, right? Our vote is our power, and that's why there are so many structures in place that disenfranchise people of color now and have throughout history. And so one of the things that I think we need to do in New Jersey is to answer a lot of the attacks on voting rights that we're seeing from a federal level and national level. The Supreme Court has come in and really weakened the voting protections that we have under the federal VRA, which came, after years and years of activism, particularly from the Black community, John R. Lewis. That used to be, the federal VRA used to be sort of this bastion of protections for voting rights, and specifically voting rights for Black and other voters of color. It is weakened now. We don't really get as many protections as we used to get at the height of it. So what other states have done and what New Jersey also needs to do is answer the weakening of those voter protections and also make sure that we are making democracy more accessible to all of these communities that are typically disenfranchised. So in Jersey, we do have a bill, the New Jersey Voter Empowerment Act. It's a state voting rights act, which basically is enshrining into state law a lot of the protections that we used to get on the federal level, but then also going further. So making sure that Black and brown and other voters of color aren't discriminated against at the polls, that they aren't being harassed at the polls or being driven away. Having actual legal protections in state law to make sure that that is happening. Having increased language access so that those who do not speak or read or write in English as their first language, they're still able to vote. They're still able to look at their ballot and see what the ballot is asking them. That increases access to democracy and to voting here in New Jersey. That's really important. There are other really important parts, I think, that build that inclusive democracy, things like making sure that there's transparency, that voters have access to information that otherwise you have to go through 100 different websites here in New Jersey to get even a crumb of information. Having a centralized place to make sure you can go see that so that you can identify patterns of, hold on, is my community actually being discriminated against? Are there patterns of discrimination that's happening at the county level, at the city level? And do I have the legal tools to challenge that? That's something else that a sort of a strong state voting rights act would do, is give those communities legal tools to challenge those sorts of things. So I think one of the strongest ways that we can create a stronger and more inclusive democracy here is to, one, protect the voters at the state level, because then it sort of doesn't matter what happens on the federal level. We have New Jersey has New Jersey voters' backs, and to use that not as a ceiling but as a floor to then go further and beyond and do more protections and do more, expand our democracy in more ways so that more people can access it and use their vote and express their power that way.
So talk about planting the seeds, right, Nusat? Because I think one of the things that we all hear, and I'm sure that you all hear a lot, is New Jersey isn't that bad. At least we're not, right? So when you think about something like the New Jersey Voting Rights Act, folks might say, like, why do we even need that? It's not happening. First of all, it is. But second, it's about what we are setting ourselves up for 10 years from now, too. It's about how we're strengthening our democracy, not just for the 2025 gubernatorial election, but, 10 years, 20 years down the line. We don't know what attacks are going to come, but we do know what protections we could start to build in. This is a state that, time feels like it does not exist, but very recently gutted our Open Public Records Act. This is a state that rolled back campaign finance laws, allowed more money in politics. Does anybody in this room think more money in politics is going to be what gets us out of this? So I think that the narrative that New Jersey isn't that bad is completely wrong. It is that bad. Because folks with power, no matter what side of the aisle they're on, no matter how blue or red the state, want to hold on to that power, and they will. One of the things that feels really far off right now, but I promise you it is not, is redistricting. So redistricting is incredibly important to taking back our power. The last redistricting cycle, Fair Districts New Jersey, which included all of the organizations you have heard from today, we were able to do something really, really remarkable. We, gathered hundreds of community maps from communities all around this state to submit to the commissions. We drew our own racial equity maps for both the legislative and the congressional redistricting processes and submitted them as a coalition. We pushed the redistricting commissions to hold more public meetings, which, what was it, 3 that they had? Yeah, come on. And for the first time, which we have been fighting for a very long time, we had the commissions release their draft map publicly prior to approving it so that we could comment on it. These are huge successes that took decades for us to get there. And it took a lot of people working together, willing to put aside ego, who did what, in order to do what was best for this democracy. All that being said, the commissions still drew maps that overrepresented white folks in the state and underrepresented communities of color. The racial equity maps, Hennel will remember, I always forget which one's which, but the racial equity maps, we had Asian plurality districts in which side? One was a majority, one was a plurality.
No, they were both pluralities, but we managed to do pretty good ones that they would grow into majorities in both congressional and state legislative. We also had multiple black majority districts in the state legislative map, multiple Latino majority districts.
That accurately reflected the explosive growth of those communities in this state. The numbers did not lie. We did not make up that population growth. We just drew the map as people were to build power. And the maps that were adopted very much upheld the status quo. They did not include accurate representations of that growth population. So our challenge for not 2030, but for today, is to start thinking about how we reform that process, because so much relies on that, right? The manipulation of how people draw communities of color literally out off the map takes away your vote before you ever get to the ballot box. So I think that, I forgot what the question was.
How are we building a multiracial democracy?
That is how we are building a multiracial democracy. We need to start thinking about planting those seeds about how we are going to take back our power today and not wait until 2029 when the redistricting cycle begins. Thanks.
Yeah, please clap for Jesse, seriously. I think I'm going to be a little bit retrospective, but I think it is really important that we not really sleep on the discussion around the county line system in New Jersey and just the fight that it took to eliminate that system and to have a fair ballot going into this primary election where for the first time in nearly 80 years in both political parties, there will be no county line on the primary ballot happening in about 60 days. And I think one of the really discrete things that I want to speak to is that, the county line fight had really, a lot of credit was given here to me today, but really that was built on the shoulders of many people who had been talking about this system, not just in terms of like grids and lines on the ballot, but just how much voter suppression had been taking place through our ballots and how voters were disenfranchised and frankly manipulated into choosing certain candidates over others and giving preferential treatment, frankly, to candidates who were more politically connected, candidates who would do the bidding of those who are their donors and who are more connected to them related to contracts, and really just fulfilling this system in New Jersey and that became much more entrenched and really outside of the view of the voters. And it took a massive movement of people to end that. And so, yes, we had the litigation in 2021 brought in federal court by Working Families Alliance and our partners, Institute, League of Women Voters, and many others participated in that as amicus, supporting our arguments just about how this system was so restrictive to voters of color in this state, right? And we have to acknowledge that this fight was brought into state court before. the state courts said that this system was okay for many, many years. And so we had to really flip the radical imagination or use our radical imagination to flip the political status quo in discourse and saying, no, we're going to go at it again at the federal level in terms of our constitutional rights. And that also on top of that, that this is not simply a matter of which candidates are going to have more money in their bank accounts and that makes them more successful, or which candidates have the best literature, right? We really had to develop a language of explaining just what was happening, right? So when we talk about ballot Siberia, where you have candidates who were not favored by county party political clerks or political operatives, rather. Those candidates were placed off in far-off columns and far-off places on the ballot. Someone came up to me and mentioned Senator Nia Gill, right? Longtime serving state senator who had been elected, but unfortunately was not able to get the party endorsements when she ran 2 years ago again, and did not receive the county line, and therefore was not successful in her reelection, right? And so we had even a sense of, this system in which you are not accountable to voters. You're accountable to, frankly, what it was often white, older men in a room making decisions about who is best to be elected and who is not. And oftentimes that put women of color, whether they were Black, Asian, Latino, at a disadvantage. And one of the things that we have always been told about the county line system was that this system actually helps voters of color. It helps people of color get elected, because how else can they be elected in our political system? Well, if that were true, why is that we still continue to see women of color disproportionately represented in our state legislature? Why is it that we continue to see that Latina women are actually losing ground, Black women are actually losing ground, Asian women are still underrepresented in our state legislature as well as our municipalities, if this system is supposed to benefit our representation and benefit our voice? And so I really want to call this out, because I think that now that we are in a place in which our ballot is now fair, more fair than it has ever been, and Hedl and Jesse can tell you, and News I can tell you, we haven't gotten to a perfect place with it, but we think we've gotten to a pretty fair place than what it was before in terms of having ballot reform. Now it's about the time is how do we continue to even the playing field, right? Because as you mentioned, we do have more money in politics. Let me also tell you is that we know that people in power do not give it up willingly. So it should not surprise you to know that in the middle of this election cycle, while people are excited about the opportunity to step up and represent their community potentially for the first time with this new playing field, they changed the thresholds, more than doubling them of what is necessary to get onto the ballot. And so all of a sudden you thought that, oh, maybe you only needed a certain amount of signatures so that you can represent your community. They then doubled that, or more than doubled that, making it harder for people to step up and run for office. And so here we are supposed to be in a time of having excitement around running for office. And previously we've had only 11% of state legislative incumbents were ever challenged in 2023, even after redistricting. And now we're entering a historic cycle. And so I think there is so much more to do in our political system. The last thing I'll say is that the one thing that I think New Jersey should put our eyes on towards in the future to address money in politics and to create an even playing field is to make sure that we can allow for small dollar donor matching programs for state legislative candidates to really even that playing field. We have it at the gubernatorial level where we can, our state can use, our coffers to match dollar for dollar what candidates raise on their campaigns. We need that at the state legislative level so that candidates who are grassroots can actually stand a chance at running for office and getting their campaign out to voters directly.
Thank you, guys. So,
Hedl, can I add something real quick? Oh, it's clapper.
Sure. We are out of time, but sure.
Super fast about campaign finance reform. My first campaign in this state was something called Clean Elections, which was like 2007 or something like that. And this campaign was candidates for assembly, they had to get $10 donations from voters in their districts, and they were matched. And it was a pilot program. We only did it in 3 districts. When we went to talk about how successful the pilot program was, which was pretty successful, the response from the candidates was, it was too hard. I had to talk to too many people. And I bring that up just because I am pretty sure you would hear a very similar thing from incumbents right now running for office about not wanting to knock on doors. It's the reason they love the line. It's the reason that they wanted to keep bracketing. It's the reason for so many things, because campaigning is meant to be hard because you are meant to earn our vote, right? And I think that that is just another example of one of these things where do not let folks continue this narrative that things aren't that bad in New Jersey. I talked very fast. Sorry about that.
No, I appreciate it. So we are going to get some questions from the audience. And while they come to me, I'm going to ask one more question, and we're going to do this quick so that we can do the 2 minutes each, so that we could do the audience questions. But, we talked about thinking about this more long term. You can't just look at what needs to happen in the next 6 months. We are building something bigger. This is why we have to think about redistricting now, and this is why we need to start thinking about the census now. The Fund for New Jersey, our co-host today, was really did tremendous work bringing advocates and the community together last cycle. We're halfway through. It feels like the census is really far away, but unfortunately, they're already doing a lot of messed up things to the Census Bureau. And it is really important. So I'm going to ask really quickly to everyone here, why does the census matter, and why does it matter right now in 2025 for folks to be thinking about it?
I'll start. So, I can't really stress enough how important the census is. It's a core building block of our democracy. So much of our government rests on the census, and that's exactly why it's under attack. Redistricting doesn't work without accurate counts of folks. Day one, Trump rescinded a Biden EO that would basically allow Trump to remove non-citizens from the count. They're trying to erase people. They are trying to say you do not matter, and that is incredibly concerning. I think that, it's the census and its data, but it's not just census data. We talked a little bit about privacy and security during the immigration rights panel, but data is truth. Data is what we can rest in. And when folks have the ability to manipulate truth, when they can take away, public data that keeps us healthy, that moves our country forward, on scientific advances, that tells our stories of who we are, where our children go to school, what we look like as a nation, and what our stories are. Manipulating that data is manipulating the truth of our country. And that's why the census is under significant attack.
Yeah, Jesse took the words out of my mouth in terms of saying that data is the truth, and that is why the census is so important. I actually spent 3 years working in a federal representative's office here in New Jersey, and during the last census, I worked with complete count committees, in communities with faith leaders, business leaders, other government leaders on making sure that we can motivate the count and making sure that we have trusted people in communities who are going to others and being able to get them to complete the census. And we know that right now, in addition to all of the attacks that are happening at the Census Bureau, we know that our federal data infrastructure is being politicized and is also going to be weaponized, because it's not simply about who they are or who they aren't counting. It is what they are going to be able to say at the end of the day about the people who they have counted, right? And certainly I think that we have seen the attacks on DEI, we have seen the attacks on equity, and that it goes squarely at the heart of our federal funding and what it means to fund our public schools and infrastructure and all of the different program needs that we have throughout our country. And so, of course, they are going to say, we don't need DEI. We don't need to fund these programs because guess what? We didn't count these people who needed these programs, right? And so I think we need to be very vigilant about the attack and weaponization of federal data. And we also need to understand that they have done, but what they've done before is to try to input a citizenship question into the census. They're certainly going to try that again, even though the Supreme Court denied them last time. And so we need to be vigilant and ready for that moment, and so that we are ready to mobilize our communities to make sure that this fundamental, constitutional thing that our government does every decade is not being weaponized to further deprive communities of the resources that they need.
Yeah, I think the thing I'll add to what Jesse and Antoinette have said is that the result of the census really does impact our communities and the power within our communities, right? The census determines funding within our communities, resources for public schools, for hospitals, for roads, for all of these things. And so if there are communities that are undercounted, or, if we remove non-citizens from the census question, then what happens is that those communities don't get funded by the federal government, by the state, whatever, what have you. And then those are the communities that suffer. And then the census is also helps determine how many representatives we get in New Jersey and in other states. So our power is also impacted that way if we're not able to reach all of the communities that should be counted within New Jersey and other places. So it's incredibly important for us to make sure that we are preparing for the census and that New Jersey has a plan in place for what's happening in the federal government, which is, defunding the census, making sure that there are questions there that are dissuading people from actually being counted. So New Jersey needs a plan. One of the things that we can do is to push for further budget, releasing funds for the budget for the census in New Jersey so that we get ahead of whatever is happening in the federal government. So that's one thing that we can actually do right now ahead of 2030 to make sure that, again, whatever is happening on the federal level, we can at least face it in New Jersey before it gets to us.
So I have some really interesting questions here. A couple of them I think we touched on a little bit, but I'm going to throw a pretty tough one out here, and we'll see what folks think. Someone in the audience asks, given the unbalanced legitimacy innate to presidential systems, is democratic decay inevitable due to the executive branch growing in power? Thoughts? I'll reframe it a little bit. And to try to touch on something that Sherrilyn discussed earlier. Was this inevitable, what we're seeing today? What did all the issues that we've seen in our system, all of the things that we've had built up, was this inevitable? And to go to a slightly hopeful note, how do we address it?
So the cynical side of me says that as a black woman in this country, which has been built on slave labor and the robbery of land from our Native American people, yes, this was inevitable. But I think that what I really come to on it is that I think that to simply put it in this moment, currently in this moment, is a disservice to the broader conversation, which I just started it in jest, but I think that there's a larger dialogue here I think that as we are starting to see these institutions come under attack, is to really understand that for a long time, especially for those who are marginalized in our community, Black, brown, immigrant, API, that many of these institutions have been failing us, right, for a long time, right? And so I think it's important to say and to be distinct, because I think that many people are saying right now that, of course, the system is broken, but their solution to the system being broken is to give more money to billionaires, right? And I think it is important for us to push back against the narratives that only offer that as the solution. And so I guess my hopeful note is that I'm saying, as things are seemingly broken or falling apart, is that I'm ready to build new things. What are the new institutions that we are going to build in this moment? What are the new places in which we are going to have culture and learning and science? The places in which democracy has historically thrived in the arts, all of those third spaces that we have historically had, that when we have been under attack as a people and as a country, those have been the places in which we allow for democracy to flourish. And so I'm ready for the conversation of how we build that again, even in this moment, through the arts and the culture, and creating those new institutions and spaces.
Is this when I can talk about Citizens United? So, I mean, I think Citizens United and money in politics is a huge part of this conversation and this problem. Yes, the executive branch has an undue amount of power right now, but part of how we got there is by having dark money in politics, by having unrestricted money coming in from a lot of different sources to elect the leaders that we have elected and who are more accountable to billionaires and to the ruling, the ruling class than to the public, the general public, and to voters. So I think one of the things that we need to do, and I echo Amy from the earlier panel, is we need to reckon with the fact that money in politics is a huge problem and is leading to this decay that we are seeing. So one of the things we can do is urge Congress to rescind Citizens United through legislation. I mean, easier said than done, for sure, but I think that is a concrete step we can take.
Sorry, Jesse, anything to add? All right. So I want to stress on this question, and before we get to the last one, is yes, it probably was inevitable. Our system has had problems from the beginning. As Antoinette said, it's what happens when you build a system on the backs of enslaved labor and genocide. The thing is, though, I hear this often. Other systems exist in the world. I don't know of any of them that exists that is a perfect system that we could point to and go, let's go and do that one. Systems were built by people, and people are fallible, and every single one of them can and have been abused and used to suppress and oppress people. So one thing I want to note is that our system has many, many problems, but there is something here that we can make it better. The ideas exist to make it better, that if we do the work to shore up the things that are weak, to actually fix the issues, to build on what we can make our existing system better. We can roll back some of the power that we've given the executive, the president. We can go back to a system with 3 co-equal branches of government, and we could have a system where the states themselves can be a check. Cities can be empowered to do these things, but it takes a lot of work. It is, and I hesitate in these types of things because sometimes it's much easier to say our system is completely broken, it was always meant to be this way, it's terrible, we can't do anything about it, and just throw our hands up. It's much harder to roll up our sleeves and try to make it better and make it something that that actually works for all of us. So on that note, last question. What can all of these people, these tremendous people here, do? And I've seen it. This is a room full of people who are working. Jesse mentioned all of these people doing the work, hard work, day in and day out, in every lever of it, from in the courts, in the legislature, drawing community maps, as we've done with Bruce Morgan and the NAACP of Greater New Brunswick, but everything else. So what can they do to help us build and fix this system that is so messed up?
I think it is so easy for us to fall into despair given everything that is happening on basically every single level right now. But I think in order to do that, you willingly cede power to the other side of the narrative, which is that we don't have power and there's absolutely nothing we can do to change anything that's happening. And I don't think we should willingly cede power. So one of the things that we can do if what we are feeling is just despair from so many levels up, from the federal government, is bring the fight to the state and local level. There are so many things that we can be doing at the state and local level. Find out who your representatives are, contact them. There's so many state bills here in New Jersey itself that are trying to strengthen and create a more inclusive democracy here in New Jersey. So I mentioned the State Voting Rights Act earlier. We have same-day voter registration, which is a bill that we have been wanting to pass for years and years. Call your legislators and tell them that this is extremely important to you because they hear from us all the time. They just ignore us now. There's automatic voter registration. There's, the effort to lower the voting age. There are so many actions that we can be taking on the state and local level, and that's where we need to be organizing now, because that is where our power is, and we need to make sure that we don't cede that power and that they know we are not ceding that power.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think I have two things, but they'll be super quick. But I think, I come out of a tradition of labor organizing. And so we always say, don't agonize, organize. I think it's so important for folks to find their political home in spaces in which they can organize other people, whether it is just that weekend club and you and your friends are getting together and you're having conversations with one another about the things that you're going through and and how you're dealing with the day-to-day. It's find those spaces in which you can turn some of that anxiety and some of the feelings that you're feeling into action, right? And use it to talk to people into your communities. We've been doing these community listening sessions, including in Newark. We did one 2 weeks ago at Bethany Baptist Church, and we did another one at the Reformed Church of Highland Park with a lot of community partners, many who I see in this room. And we asked people in those rooms, what keeps you up at night? But we also asked them, what gives you hope? And it was an amazing conversation to really understand what's on people's minds, but then also to how can we talk about addressing those things together as a community. So I think finding your political home is key. And then, the last thing I'll say is that if you don't see yourself represented and who's currently representing you, step up and run for office. I think that right now, again, we're in this moment where we have a political opening and there's a lot of excitement, and it's time for new energy into our political system to bring fresh ideas, to move democracy forward, and to make sure our community voices are being heard. And so I think there's no way a better way of doing that in terms of being able to step up and run for office.
So a couple of things that we heard today that I think I just want to lift up again is don't obey in advance. We've heard that multiple times. Don't give in to despair. Remember that you are powerful. I'm going to say two more things. I'll be quick, Hannel. About arts, because we kept hearing about the arts today, right? And I want to lift this up. So my master's is actually in fine arts. I'm a poet at night, I guess, when I'm not doing this. And there is a reason that dictators come for the artists, right? NJPAC, the city of Newark, they are doing amazing work connecting social justice and art right here. And I think that, one thing that you can do is invest in it. Invest your time, invest your money, show up for the artists because they are going to be the ones that are moving hearts and minds. Now, with my democracy hat on, they're not very different hats. Tonight, something like 1,700 people RSVP'd to come to this gubernatorial forum. It is amazing, right? Everybody in this room is likely very engaged in politics. I guarantee you, everyone around you is not. And this is something we forget so often. At the League of Women Voters, we're working in community every day, year-round at tables. And the amount of misinformation out there about just how to participate in elections, the number of folks who don't know that an election is coming, or if they do, they don't know voter registration deadlines or what party affiliation declaration forms are, or the confusing maze that is laid out to keep people away from the polls. It is up to us, and I'm hoping everybody in this room does this, to don't assume the folks in your life know the things you know. Text them. Ask them, are they ready to participate in the June primary? Do they know what it is? Do they need a ride? Do they need help getting a mail-in ballot? Be that person, because, you know, as Brandon said, as the previous panel said, the eyes of the nation are on us right now for this election. Join the League of Women Voters. Join any of these organizations. Join Million Voters Project. Come out and knock doors with us. There are very concrete things that you could do in the next month alone to make a significant difference in the trajectory of democracy in this country.
All right, thank you. I want to thank our panelists for this tremendous discussion, and I want to thank the audience for joining us today for this conversation and for some terrific questions. And we will turn it over to Brandon.
That was an excellent panel. Please give them all a round of applause one more time. Thank you all. I appreciate you all. So this concludes the Doubling Down on Democracy program. I want to again thank everyone at NJPAC, everybody at NJ Institute for Social Justice for your partnership and your vision in making today possible. I also want to thank, this is my third day back from parental leave. And thank you. We've been planning all of this over the past 3 months, and so I wasn't working. So the person on my staff who took care of most of this is Naima Campbell, so thank you, Naima, who had only been on staff for 2 weeks before I took my parental leave. So thank you. It was a lot of work to get this together, but we're very happy about this. You know, as was said, you know, we're in very perilous times, y'all, and so now more than ever, we must center and support the importance of community. You know, I've had conversations about organizing. What does organizing mean? And some people view organizing as this like political term. Organizing is just, can a community take care of itself and keep itself safe? Right? And so we really need to organize and help each other and keep each other safe. And so the Fund for New Jersey is really honored to sponsor today's events, and we can't thank you enough for your time and your dedication in being here. Again, there is the gubernatorial forum tonight at 6:30. If you've already registered, wonderful, we'll see you there. If you have not and you would like to go, just go to the box office downstairs and you can register and join in and join the 1,700 other folks who are going to be there. It's going to be a very important conversation. Otherwise, that does it for today. Thank you for being here and get home safe.